Hi everybody, my name is Stacy, or Miss Dyer as my students call me. You'll have to bear with me with this setup. Hopefully you'll be able to see everything okay. I did just want to make sure that there's a big enough screen so you could see the PowerPoint. So today we're going to be talking about teachers' unions. And I did a little bit of a Google research, and obviously some of the first things I found was about how good they are, how much, we love them, how much teacher loves them. We know there's a couple things that they're known for, and one is that they're fighting for better pay and benefits for teachers. And the other thing is that I came across is they said that schools with unions tend to perform better. And I came across something that said that union dues were tax deductible, and also that unions are supposed to protect teachers from political change. So it seems like, being part of a union is pretty good as far as teachers go. But what if teachers' unions aren't exactly all that they claim to be? What if we go back all those points that I just mentioned before? Let's really take a look closer and analyze and see if they are in fact doing as much good as they claim to be doing. So the first thing we're going to talk about is money. So obviously, most of you know that most teachers have to hold a master's degree. Especially in New York State, you have to get your master's. But did you know that teachers make about $20,000 less a year than any other worker holding that same degree? $20,000 less than the other workers making that degree. So you can see on this chart here, if you can see, this right here is the average worker holding an advanced degree. These are less than high school graduates. Right here is high school graduate, bachelor's degree, and then down here we have your elementary and secondary school teachers. Now you can see they're on the lower end compared to all the other average people who hold a master's degree. And in fact, this one, if you can see, is showing that over the past decade, teachers have actually had a pay decrease over the years when you actually factor in inflation. So you can see the blue is public teachers and the pink is regular full-time employees. And you can see the difference that's over the years. So I start to question, now what exactly is it that the teachers unions are doing? How are they helping us, considering this is their main job, is fighting for teachers and making sure they have good wages. So some of the things obviously we know that they do is strike. So in a couple of the bigger ones we'll mention is back in 2018 and in 2022, several, like back in 2018, teachers from about 300 school districts and from all over the states or all over the country held strikes in order to fight for higher wages and better teaching conditions and all that. But despite all of this, teachers are still making way less than any other worker holding the same degree. And this is interesting, being that the amount of work that teachers are expected to do, you're holding a high degree, you're expected to do massive amounts of work, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, coming up with your curriculum. And it's such an important job to be making less than anybody else with that holds that same degree. And actually, right now, as far as strikes, over in Massachusetts, there is a Newton Public School. Their school district is being fined over $625,000 for a 15-day strike that the teachers and their unions participated in. So apparently it's illegal in Massachusetts for public workers to strike. So the courts were able to go after and implement these fines against the school district. And parents are turning around and suing the school district for the 11 days that their students miss school because of it. So who knows, if so far it's been thrown out, and I know they're appealing it, who knows how it'll go, but I have to wonder, whatever the agreement was it worth the $625,000 plus amount that now these school districts are going to have to pay out in fines, as opposed to if maybe the teachers had just gone in and asked for more money, they would have had more money to go around. So the next point after talking about the money is there was discussion that I had seen about schools that are very heavily unionized do better or perform better than those who aren't. So I thought we would kind of take a look at charter schools versus public schools, and just to get an idea. Now I'm going to show a quick video, and it's about, they go to a charter school, so they take a look at it, they meet with an administrator there. He kind of goes over some good points about why he feels that they are better than the public schools, and you get to follow along a family and see that how much parents are fighting to get their children into the charter schools.
America's schools spend lots of money, but often barely educate kids.
Our public schools are failing.
Philadelphia's failing public school district.
I went to the neighborhood school.
Elaine Wells is a mom in Philadelphia.
There were fights after school every day. It was horrible.
So she walked her son to another school.
We went to go enroll, and we were told, no, can't go here. That was my wake-up call.
She discovered that although with most services we get to shop around, that's not true for so-called public schools. Instead, parents are often stuck with the school the government assigns them.
Just want to turn this.
But a new kind of school's been changing that. Charter schools.
It's funded with taxpayer money, but Hardy gets to run it, largely like a private school.
In Philadelphia, David Hardy created a charter he calls Boys Latin. It tries new ideas.
People in government-run schools don't like to change.
They also don't like competition from charters. But charters are often better, and parents line up, hoping to get their kids admitted.
A lottery will decide which students will stay or go.
This lottery was in New York.
Congratulations.
The winners are ecstatic, but there are many more losers.
You're on pins and needles, and you're hoping, and you're praying.
The charter school lottery left thousands of Philadelphia students disappointed last night.
It's like, you don't have a chance.
Elaine's kids lost many lotteries.
It's heartbreaking.
But finally, they were admitted to David Hardy's school.
Shirts are tucked in.
Yep.
That's important to you.
Yep.
And the kids, they don't mind it.
Of course they mind it. Teenage boys.
The rules are there to kind of set the stage for the students. If the teacher can tell you to tuck in their shirt, they can tell you to be quiet in class, they can tell you to do your homework, it gives us some authority over the kids.
Elaine was so eager for her sons to attend, she arranged to have Ibrahim repeat the 6th grade. I bet you didn't like that.
Nah, not at all. That's when that was the moment where I most despised Boys Latin in every possible way.
But their attitudes quickly changed.
Before Boys Latin, I would come home and say, okay, I need you to read for an hour, read a book. And their response would be, why? What did we do? Like, reading was a punishment.
Was a punishment.
Right. So, getting into Boys Latin, I would find books in the bathroom, on the floor.
Came to the point where the teacher would tell our mom that I've taken too many books.
And then there were the strange nighttime phone calls.
He's in his room, and I hear him talking on the phone, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, who are you on the phone with? And he was like, well, Mr. Bombowski told me to call him if I needed help with homework.
He thought he was bothering the teacher.
Yes. Yes.
Another change was the kids spending more time in school. They're here from 8 a.m. to often 5 p.m. And they have to take Latin. It's ridiculous. Nobody speaks Latin.
Well, we picked Latin because it was hard.
What's the point of that?
Because life is hard. Because in order to be prepared, you have to work hard. And we wanted to get that into the psyche of our students
Do you feel sorry for your friends who
A
are
little
still
bit.
stuck in the old?
It's kind of sad because I'm looking at them like, why? Like, what you mean? You're taking algebra 1 in senior year. You're supposed to be taking pre-calc.
We delivered. Since the very first class, we've sent more black boys to college than any high school in Pennsylvania.
And yet now, Philadelphia and many other cities are rejecting new charter applications. Philadelphia rejected David Hardy's plan to open a girls' lab. You're succeeding and they're trying to kill you off.
Because they realize that if we continue to take children away, they won't have jobs.
Most studies on charters find increases in test scores. Kids don't learn as well in most government-run schools.
There's always a reason in a government-run school for not serving kids. They'll tell you what's wrong with the kid. They never say, it's my fault.
Instead,
So students are going to march for more funding.
the government schools say they need more money.
Members of the Philadelphia Teachers Union to push for more funding.
More funds? Get this. Philly schools already spend almost $19,000 per child. Do the math. That's almost $500,000 per classroom. Where does the money go?
They have a director of special ed, and they have an assistant director of special ed. They have director of high school athletics, and they have an assistant. And they have a lot of overhead.
To preserve their jobs, government teachers now say this.
The publicly funded, privately managed charter schools drain scarce resources from other public schools.
Drain public funds.
You can't tell me that charter schools are taking funding from public schools. Every parent pays taxes, and it's the taxes that we pay that fund the school system. So if I choose for my child to go to a charter school, then that's where my taxes should go.
That makes sense. But Philadelphia and other cities don't even give charters the same amount of money they give to schools they control. They give them less. In Philadelphia, only 70% of that. So the government schools make money whenever a kid leaves for a charter. Over 13 years of schooling, Philadelphia saves $70,000 per child. What if they gave you the difference?
Yes, absolutely give the rest of the money.
But it would also mean that there would be a whole lot less union jobs. And the union's not going to be for that.
There are bad charters.
But bad charters close. Bad public schools don't close.
That's a big difference. When charters don't deliver for kids, they go out of business. The government monopoly never goes out of business.
Okay. So as you can see from that, a lot of the parents were fighting to get into the charter schools, and you also see that unions are against them because obviously they don't feel compelled to have unions in their schools, so they don't have a job. So the next thing we'll go over is this peer-reviewed journal. This is one of the things that I encourage you guys all to read. It's got some really good stuff in it. It's about a study that answers the question by comparing cognitive outcomes and per student spending for charter schools compared to public schools. So as you can see by here, if you can see it, that pretty much the study finds that on average, charter schools outperform public schools in both reading and math proficiency. And that difference is even greater in the urban districts compared to the non-urban districts. So the urban charter schools report 24.9% higher proficiency in reading and then 28.8% higher in math. So they also said that regarding academic regulations, that charter schools have more autonomy and flexibility in teacher certification and certification requirement and participation in teachers' unions, and that helps to explain why they do so much better. So this is just one study. I know there are several out there comparing test scores to those of charter schools versus those of public schools, and for the most part the charter schools are doing better because they have a little bit more control over their curriculum and things like that that make it so that it's a better situation for their students. Now, I'm not saying that public schools are bad by any means. I'm just saying are the unions really doing what they are supposed to be, or say that they're doing, that they're being so helpful? So the next thing we come down to is just talk about teachers unions in general. Like, who are they? So we know the two major ones are the American Federation for Teachers, and then there is the National Education Association. Now there's also a pretty big union here in New York State, which is New York State United Teachers Union. And they are both, that union is affiliated with both the ATF and the NEA, and they represent over 6,000 teachers and school-related professionals here in New York. So pretty much how the union works is the union elects representatives that represent their local areas. So then they also elect delegates that go to the annual state conventions, and they are the ones who meet and they set up the policy that determines the programs and the services that the unions will provide. These same delegates or representative assembly then elect officers that oversee a professional staff that carries out the union's business. Like in New York State, there's about like 16 of them, I think it was, scattered around, full offices with employees. They also elect a board of directors that determines the policy in between the conventions. So the unions have about, this particular union has over 400 employees that they employ right here in New York. So talking about the union dues, I couldn't find anything on there that would tell me specifically how much they were. But just so we know, first off, unions are funded through the membership dues, but also voluntary contributions and grants. So members of the union, they will end up paying their local unions their dues. And each of those locals determine the structure and the amount and things like that. The other thing that was interesting is that union dues are no longer tax deductible. So you cannot claim them on your federal taxes. Now there are still some states that will allow you to claim them on your state income tax, but as far as federally, you are not able to claim them. So I was curious also whether how much that the union was actually paying some of their employees. And so I did a quick little job search and I found a couple, and one of them is the assistant to the president with a starting salary of $62,000. Okay? So then the next one I found was a manager of print and mail with a starting salary of $95,000. Now let that sink in a little bit. Teachers take money out of their hard-earned small paychecks to pay these unions to fight for bigger paychecks and better benefits, for them to turn around and pay their employees this kind of money. Now this is just a manager of print and mail. I can imagine what the higher up employees are actually making at these companies. So it just seems a little bit ironic that they are supposed to be fighting for our pay when they're turning around and making that kind of money. So finally, now let's talk about teachers, unions, and politics. It's funny that they say that they're supposed to protect teachers from political change, yet they are one of the biggest political powerhouses out there right now. And as we probably mostly know, all the unions favor the Democratic Party. So in 2018, $4 million was put into the Clinton and Barack Obama campaigns. In 2016, that support was divided between Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And it's no surprise that the New York State Union also leans their support more towards the Democrat Party. So again, our money that the teachers are putting in are being divvied out to political campaigns. Also, if you notice the back that I had said that that the unions also take grants. So not only are they taking our money, but they're taking grant money that could possibly be going to the schools, that could hire more teachers so we can have smaller classrooms, that could pay the teachers more, that could bring in more computers, more whatever that is needed. It just seems a little bit funny that that most of that money is going everywhere but to really benefit teachers. So this brings me to the other article that I would really love you guys to read, and it's called 7 Reasons to Say Goodbye to Teachers Unions. And the reason I really like this one is that he in there says, like, he makes a very valid point at the end that teachers can bargain for themselves. Like back when unions came out, factory workers had no education, no special skills. Like, the unions helped protect them. Teachers, that's not the same for teachers. Teachers are very educated. They're high skilled. They need teachers desperately. Teachers are smart enough and capable enough of standing up on their own, working with their school districts and their boards and things like that to try to get better situations. If money was not being poured into these unions, maybe this money could actually be allocated to where it needed to be, and that would be better schools, better pay, and happier teachers. So I'm going to leave you with one final video to watch that is interesting, and I encourage everybody to think out, to really look into things and come up with your own list of pros and cons to the teachers union, and decide yourself whether you think you would like to be part of one, and you think they're helpful or beneficial, or maybe not.
How would you like to fund politicians with whom you strongly disagree? Not interested? How about if I forced you? How would I do that? Well, what if I said, if you don't pay, you lose your job? For decades, millions of state and local government workers, police, firefighters, teachers, and others have been forced to make that choice. And who forces them? Public sector unions. That is, unions who represent public sector employees. How? It's pretty straightforward. First, they demand employees pay hundreds of dollars in union dues as a condition of employment, meaning if they don't pay, they get fired. Next, they use that money to support and elect union-friendly politicians. Then, they negotiate contracts with those same politicians, kinda like negotiating with yourself. It's a sweet deal, unless you're a worker who doesn't agree with those union-friendly politicians, or the taxpayer who has to foot the bill for those union contracts. This game plan is not a secret. Here's what the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees say on their website. We elect our bosses, so we've got to elect politicians who support us and hold those politicians accountable. These perverse incentives might help explain why, for most of American history, pretty much no one thought that unionizing government workers was a good idea. This includes liberal icon President Franklin Roosevelt. Roosevelt was a very strong supporter of private sector unions, but a very strong opponent of public sector unions. Here's what he said on the subject in 1937. All government employees should realize that the process of collective bargaining cannot be transplanted into the public service. Roosevelt recognized that public sector unions could hold the government hostage at will. They could simply threaten to walk off the job if they didn't get what they wanted. Sanitation workers, for example, could put public health at risk by refusing to collect the garbage. Other public employees would have similarly disruptive power. This was, Roosevelt believed, unthinkable and intolerable. In 1943, New York State's highest court agreed, calling government unions not only incompatible with the spirit of democracy, but inconsistent with every principle upon which our government is founded. In the late 1950s, New York City and Wisconsin defied this view and allowed their public employees to unionize. but it was President John F. Kennedy who opened the floodgates. In order to win the support of union leadership in the 1960 presidential election, he promised to allow federal employees to unionize, and fulfilled that promise with Executive Order 10988 in 1962. It was a shrewd political move, but a bad deal for the country, and its consequences are still being felt today, as public sector unionization spread rapidly in the decades that followed. Today, unions wield tremendous power in government. Try to fire a poor-performing government worker in New York City or Los Angeles, or almost any unionized government employee anywhere. It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, no matter how incompetent they might be. According to one union contract in Michigan, employees could be caught drunk at work 5 times before being fired. And then there are the pension plans, income paid out to government workers after they retire. Pensions barely exist in the private sector anymore. They're much too expensive. But they're standard for public sector unions and have bankrupted cities like Detroit and have government union-heavy states like Illinois on the brink of financial calamity. Unfunded pension obligations, that is, money that the government doesn't have but has promised to government retirees, are anywhere from $4 to $6 trillion nationwide. Over $250 billion of that belongs to Illinois alone. But fortunately, there is some hope. Today, 28 states have passed right-to-work laws, stating that no worker can be forced to join or pay a union as a condition of employment. When joining and paying the union becomes voluntary, the same thing invariably happens. Workers leave in droves, and thus the union's ability to manipulate the system declines sharply. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has extended this right to public employees in the other 22 states as well. In Janus versus the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, the court ruled that public employees cannot be compelled to pay union dues against their will. Millions of public employees don't want to be pawns for the union agenda. Thanks to this ruling, they no longer have to be. And we, the taxpayers, have a fresh opportunity to make sure that our politicians work for us, not the unions. I'm Akash Chogli, Senior Policy Fellow at Americans for Prosperity for Prager University.
Okay, well, I hope you guys all learned something, and I can't wait to see some of the pros and cons that you come up with. Thanks.